Good morning. Today is Friday, July 12th, 2024. The definition of terrorism is violence that is intended to cause fear. And unfortunately, terrorism is very effective at doing that. Since October 7th, everyone in Israel and many of us here wonder, where am I safe? What will happen in the next minute? It's not normal or healthy to dwell on these questions, but we are doing so more and more. And this is aside from the grief, the sadness over the losses, the empathy for those who are suffering directly. And there is also tremendous confusion and uncertainty. How do we live with that? In 2015, about 9 years ago, there was a terror attack in Israel. A husband and wife were shot and killed in their car with their children in the back seat. The parents of the young man, Rabbi Henkin, he has since passed away of blessed memory. He was a well-known Torah scholar. And his wife, the mother of the boy who was killed, Rabbanit Chana Henkin. Rabbanit Henkin is one of the greatest trailblazers of our time. I've had the privilege to meet her, to learn from her. She is a role model. She is an incredible, incredible person. She is without question one of the greatest teachers of Torah today. She is the founder and the director of Nishmat, which is perhaps the world's foremost education program for advanced Jewish studies for women. And she is largely responsible for a gigantic surge in advanced women's Torah learning in our generation. She's just an incredible, incredible person. So this happened in 2015. In 2016, it was about 8 months later, Rabbanit Henkin was our guest at the annual convention of the RCA, the Rabbinical Council of America. And she spoke to us about her tragedy. And specifically, she spoke to us about how she responded to what happened through prayer. And I want to share with you just a part of what she said. One of the most famous Jewish prayers, and we have discussed this together many, many times. Tehillim, Chaf Gimel, Psalm number 23, Mizmar LeDavid Hashem Roi LeEchzar, a song sung to David, God is my shepherd, I shall not want. And one of the most famous lines in that famous prayer, Ach Tov v'chesed yirdafuni kol yemei chayai. Now we usually translate that is, surely goodness and kindness will follow me all the days of my life. But it's just not true. It is not an accurate view of life. Often, all too often, goodness and kindness do not follow us. Sometimes it's tragedy and pain and loss that follow us. In addition to that, she said, the translation that I shared with you is not an accurate translation. Yes, that is the way we will most often hear it translated, but it's not accurate. Ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai is more accurately translated as, I must pursue goodness and kindness all the days of my life. It's not a promise. It's a challenge. Because that's what life is. Life is a series of challenges. It's not a series of promises. I learned from Rabbanit Henkin an Israeli idiom that I did not know before. Perhaps you've heard it. Dod shel sukariot. Dod shel sukariot. So literally it means, I guess you'd have to translate it, Uncle Candy. For example, in a lot of synagogues here, we have the candy man, a person who every child that comes to shul, he gives them a candy. Or it could be some beloved family member. Any family gathering, there's one uncle, there's one person who just gives out candy to everybody. Dod shel sukariot, the candy man. Chana Henkin, Rabbanit Chana Henkin said, God is not a Dod shel sukariot. God's job is not to hand out treats to us. That's not the purpose. That's not why we're here. And so if the basis and the goal of our prayer is that I should be safe and happy, yes, of course, that's what we want. That's what we ask for. That's what we're hoping for, yes. But if my expectation is that the goal of my prayer will be that I am safe and happy, we will be disappointed. Because prayer does not give us that. Because God does not give us that. Because life does not give us that. And so, if that is what we're thinking about when we pray, the expectation that we should be happy and safe, then especially now, since October 7th, the events that are happening in Israel and around the world, including in Montreal, they are just making this problem more difficult. They are making prayer more difficult for many of us. For many of us, it is more difficult to pray in any kind of meaningful way when we are praying so hard and so often our prayers appear to us to be going unanswered. So what we need, explained Rabbanit Henkin, we need a different paradigm for prayer. We are not correctly understanding what prayer is supposed to do for us, what prayer is supposed to achieve. Now I'm going to be using some of my own words, and so I'm kind of paraphrasing what Rabbanit Henkin said. We come to the synagogue on Shabbos, and we say a prayer after the Torah reading, Musaf, and Amidah. It's a standing prayer. The word Musaf means added. It's the additional prayer we say on Shabbos. Every day of the week we say one Amidah for Shachris, the morning prayer. On Musaf we say Shachris, the morning prayer, and then an added prayer specifically for Shabbos called Musaf, the added prayer, the additional prayer. Now originally, when the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, was standing, that was a korban, it was a sacrifice. Every day there was a daily sacrifice. On Shabbos there was an extra sacrifice in honor of Shabbos, called the Musaf, the added sacrifice. With the destruction of the temple, prayer becomes its substitute. We've discussed this before. In what manner? What does that mean to say prayer is the substitute for a sacrifice? And we use the Ramban to explain that the word karban, which means sacrifice, has as its root karav, to come closer. Sacrifice is a gesture. And so, in the absence of the sacrifice, prayer accomplishes the same goal. It brings us closer to God. Prayer expresses our yearning to come closer to God. Not for what God will give us. Again, if that's our expectation, we are going to be disappointed. Not for what God will give us. Simply to yearn for holiness. Simply to remove ourselves for a while from a world of uncertainty and enter a place in our minds and our souls where our soul can connect to its source, which is God. That is the goodness and kindness we can encounter through prayer. We can follow and achieve goodness and kindness through prayer by taking a few moments to connect to God. That's the paradigm of what prayer can do for us. And that is the comfort that prayer can realistically and meaningfully provide for us. And that goal can come even before the first word of prayer we utter. There's a strange practice. It sounds like a strange practice. It was actually originally the idea of the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, the great Kabbalist, who said, and there are many people that do this, and I'm suggesting to you and to me that we should do this, before we start the Amidah, before we begin to pray, we should say the following words to ourselves. Say them in any language that you want. I accept upon myself the mitzvah of ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, to love my fellow as I love myself. Seems a little bit strange. It's a beautiful sentiment, but why does it belong right before I'm starting to talk to God? I'm starting to talk to God. Why do I need to remind myself of my relationship with the other people? So let me answer that by starting with the following question. You have a shul, a synagogue, the sanctuary, the room in which the prayer takes place. It's holy, right? Our sages call synagogue mikdash ma'at, a miniature sanctuary, a miniature version of the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple. Our sages tell us that there is hashras hashchina, God's presence dwells in a synagogue. We symbolize that with a ner tamid, a light that we keep on all the time to remind us that God's presence is there. So let me ask this very simple question. What makes it holy? What is it that makes the room, the space, holy? What is it that causes the Shekhinah, God's presence, to rest and to dwell in that place? Well, it's not the room. It's not the walls. It's not the floor. It's not the tables. It's not the chairs. It's not the Torah scrolls. It's not the Sidurim and Chumashim, the prayer books. All of those things can be there, and that does not bring holiness to the room. Yes, of course, those objects are holy, but the room is not holy. If I put a Torah scroll in my closet, doesn't mean that my closet is holy, that God's presence is in the closet. The presence of those objects does not make a room holy. Says the Talmud in Masechta Sanhedrin, Kol be'asara shchinta sharia. When there is a minyan present, when there is a group of Jews who gather for the purpose, with the intention to pray together as a group, Shchinta Sharia, that's what brings the divine presence. The Sfas Emes explains that since when there is a minyan, the Shekhinah is in the room, the Shekhinah, God's presence, pulls us toward God. It's almost as if we, by joining together in order to pray, we have instant entry to God's presence. So again, before even the first word of prayer, our first thought should be simply that by all of us being in this space, about to begin prayer, at that moment, the fact that we are standing here or sitting here, intending to pray together in a moment, that brings God's presence to dwell in this space. Kol Be'asara, Shchinta Sharia. Simply the fact that the group is gathered in order to pray causes every one of us to come closer to God, because God's presence dwells, enters. And that's why the moment before we start to pray, it is so meaningful to say this Kabbalah of V'ahavta, I accept upon myself the mitzvah to love my fellow as I love myself. It is specifically at this moment that I connect with those next to me that brings God closer. If I'm there by myself, okay, I'm there by myself. I can pray by myself. But that doesn't bring the Shekhinah, God's presence. There is an immediacy of God's presence that's only due to the fact that there are others to the left of me and to the right of me. It is our joining together. And so therefore, I have to remind myself, I want to be joined with you. I want to be connected with you because I love you the way I love myself. And so once I feel that, that is what connects us, and that is what brings God's presence. I want to suggest to you and to me that it's something very, very important to think about. Just before we begin to pray, think about the person to your left and think about the person to your right. And think about how everyone around you, how everyone in the room is helping you. Everyone in the room is helping me to better connect with God. And I, likewise, am helping every other person in the room to better connect with God. Because without our sharing this space for the purpose of prayer, God's presence does not come with the same reality, with the same immediacy. It is everyone in the room enabling all of us to encounter God. That's the paradigm of prayer we need to handle today's world. My friends, I wish you a good day and a beautiful Shabbos, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.